Welcome and bienvenidos. And depending on when you're watching this, buenos dias, buenos tardes, or buenas noches. First and foremost, if you are returning and this is not the first time you're listening to the podcast, thank you so much for joining us. If there is your first time, welcome to Tech Tequila. And let me tell you, you are in for a real treat because I have Maria here, who is the numero uno techie chica at Praxis Data Security. And she is here to share everything, her vast knowledge about ways to get your business set up correctly, if you have any concerns about your data, and putting that all in place and helping out. And so welcome, Maria. I'm super excited to have you here. Welcome, and bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, Tech Tequila. If you don't know who I am, I'm Kat Lopez Shelby, and I'm the founder and CEO of Shelby Technology Solutions. But more importantly, you're here for Tech Tequila, where we learn a lot about tech, and we may have some nice tequila drinks while we're at it. If you're new here, Tech Tequila is all about everything technology-based for your business. So what that means is we have suppliers on here to talk about how they can help you grow your business. We, have mindset coaches on here talking about how to help you grow your business. We're all about business and basically introducing you to different suppliers and different ways that help you within your business. But before we get into sitting down and really touching on what Maria does and how she can benefit your company, as well as just overall tech trends, let's do what we do best and let's make a drink. So we decided to go a little more, and I don't want to say basic, but let's say classic, a little classic today.
I think it's very Texas.
Yes.
It's a very Texas drink.
Absolutely. So what we're going to make is a ranch water. So I have mine here, which I'll put up right here, my glass right here. And I use a shot glass for my measurement, but let me grab my tequila real quickly. I just picked this bad boy up today. In case you haven't heard of it, it's Lalo right here. And I'm super excited about Lalo for a couple of reasons. In case you haven't ever heard of it before, Lalo is actually named after Eduardo Lalo Gonzalez. And he is the grandson of Don Julio Gonzalez. So I'm sure you've heard of Don Julio before, but he is the famous founder of the Don Julio tequila brand. And Lalo created his own to honor his family. So we'll give this bad boy a try. I just picked it up today. So when I make my ranch water, I generally put about one shot, half a shot into it. Generally, is that about what you put in usually?
I put in, I have a little bit more of a heavy hand, I think, but I'll do a one shot of, and I don't have, I can go grab some stuff. I was just kind of going to eyeball it for today because I'm at home.
I was going to say, there's nothing wrong with eyeballing it. That's for sure. Nothing at all. So I'm going to put mine in here. I guess this is a bigger shot. Salute. So I'll put this in right now. And then what I like about a ranch water, it is Texan, obviously, but it's also it's easy, super easy to make. 9 times out of 10, you've got everything that you need already. So for example, all it really is tequila, a little bit of lime. You can either put fresh lime and squeeze it in there, or obviously lime juice. I'm using the Lay Lime juice, and I think Miss Maria has a brand new. And then you put in your favorite sparkling water. That's what I was gonna say. I'm gonna be very transparent. I generally put in Topo Chica 9 times out of 10. But what's really nice about this, it's basic, and it is, we'll say classic instead of basic. And it's super easy to make, and it's very refreshing. And then of course, you have the best add-on that I could possibly think of, which is, of course,
chamoy. Did you say chamoy?
Yes, I was going to say chamoy and tahini is the best.
Well, I have the original chamoy, but I decided I have two. I have, the big chamoy I get for to put on my fruit. But today I decided to go with the tahini chamoy. Mm-hmm. This is the first time I'm trying it, so we're going with that. And then to rim mine with tahini. So I'm actually going to rim mine before I start making it.
Okay.
Make sure instead of doing the lime rim, I did the chamoy. And
I love it. Well, while you're doing that, let me touch on a few things because, of course, this episode is going to come out during one of my favorite months of the year. I mean, for many reasons. I love October because we have Halloween, but it is also cybersecurity. It's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So when I say that like all the stars align, this could not be, a better episode to start out this month on because we've got you, and not to say that it's the end all be all about cybersecurity, but I feel that your company brings so much to the table to help businesses to stay protected, make sure that they cover everything.
Yes, thank you about that. And I know we had talked earlier. It's that governance piece, and that's been a big topic for everything lately in all the cybersecurity talks. Is we can have things in place, we can put policies, procedures in place, and all the technology in place. But if you're not governing those programs and governing it throughout the year, and you're just kind of checking on it once a year, that's not really cutting it, especially with a lot of the requirements.
So first off, let's back up a little bit. And, I have said here and said how amazing you are, Medea, but why don't you kind of give us a little brief introduction into, what you bring to the table, what your experience is, and, tell us everything about your company.
I will. But first, can we say cheers because I have finished making my ranch water?
Absolutely. Salute. Yours is so much prettier than mine. I'm jealous.
The chamoy, I will tell you, was really good with it because it has a little bit of sweetness on the rim for it. So it's really delicious. Well, thank you. And thanks for saying wonderful things about me. I own a company called Praxis Data Security. And really, I think what sets it aside from a lot of the, we're tech and tequila, we're not a technical company. We do not implement technologies. We do governance, we do risk, and we do compliance. So all of the cybersecurity requirements for either a contract or because you're under, an industry compliance, or you want to get a SOC audit, or you are under PCI, anything like that, or you just, a lot of these requirements, even best practices, are to make a cybersecurity program within a company. Even micro companies need to have basic policies and procedures that really help the company stay secure, because sometimes it's just the people and the processes. And now cyber insurance is a big thing, and even small companies that have a little cyber insurance with it. And people don't really know that they don't get covered unless they've have these policies in place and these best practices in place, and that they're documented. So what Praxis does is that we come in and we help build that program, build those policies, procedures, incident response plans, business continuity plans, and also help govern it and make sure that all those requirements are met.
Which I can just imagine. I mean, myself as a business owner, having you come in is going to help take one of those many hats that a business owner wears kind of off of their head, or even like not necessarily the business owner, depending on the size of the company. Either it's going to help to relieve some pressure on a CTO, a CIO, or director of IT, the same thing. Because if you are, I mean, let's be honest, nobody wants to be in charge of the whole tech stack if they can possibly help it. But if you're in charge of this whole tech stack and you're being told we need to implement, we need to get things done, this is always staying, within regulations, within compliance is going to be on, the back of your mind. And that can lead to just additional stress. And sometimes it can lead to maybe not doing something that's really going to help you in the long term, because you're like, well, we know that this works and we know that this, to our understanding, is compliant. So let's just keep this because we know this.
No, and we're not trying to come in and change a company's culture and processes. We're just making sure that they, and I guess I'll also back up. Praxis, we chose the name of that for the company because it's a practical implementation of a theory. So even the requirements and frameworks and things like that need to fit into the culture. And when we're talking about risk, it is one of the very first things that we do is we talk to the company and make sure that how much risk they want to tolerate. And we help with, for example, any technology that gets implemented, it's, do you need it? I know we're talking about on the tech stack on like a SIM. SIM is a good example for me because there's some companies that are just structured very cloud-based, and it's such a simple flat network that doesn't need a SIM to collect all of these logs. And then we say, even a compliance says you must have a SIM, and we can make, the company is going to assume some risk. Also, we have compensating controls. This is why we don't need these. And even as a company that's on their cybersecurity maturity journey, we can say we don't really need it. If we want to add another layer of security, it will be good, but let's put that on the roadmap for the next year to see if it makes sense and what the budget is, and see where we are as a company as well. And going back to another thing that you said is, it's, taking off those hats for small businesses. Yes, it's a business owner that's a billion plate spinning, and that's one of those things where they can it's one other thing that they need to kind of keep on top of. Just like a business owner that's on the smaller side needs a CPA or somebody to do their books, it's kind of the same kind of service where it's like they need to report things and make sure things are in place. And that's the big things in cybersecurity that big companies have always had to deal with. Small companies didn't have to, and now it's just trickling to they have the same requirements and are punished for not having those at times if there is an incident. And the other thing is, we took the ideas of corporate environments and big, larger companies that have, a CISO and a CIO or CTO, and then GRC has always sat under them to help them have data to be able to run and make decisions about the company. That's exactly what Praxis is doing for businesses, is that you have your IT department, you have your technology experts, and we're helping double check that they're meeting those requirements, and helping them if there is a lack or a gap, that those things get done and documented.
Which I'm sure that takes a big, I don't want to say space off, but it's going to take some pressure or weight off of that company to know that you're working with them, you're giving them a roadmap. And so I think the idea is, when you start working with a company, what are generally some of the first things that, like, what does that look like when you start working with a company? Like, what questions do you ask? What do you need to know? Or when is the company really right size, really, to bring you in?
So, and I will take it back to like size of companies, especially on the small side. We get a lot of the smaller guys that are either needing to meet some cybersecurity requirements because of a contractual agreement. And they really are like, I don't even know what this means, and how do we get this done? So that's a good time for a small company. But again, it's all contractual. Or if they want to add a new line of business, or they want to go after another company, they want to subcontract for a larger company, cybersecurity requirements are in every single contractual agreement nowadays. And most importantly, the liability of cyber is in those contracts. And again, the bigger contracts that a company will get will have their risk that they're able to absorb. Their vendor management program say, hey, we want to do business with these people because they make this widget that we need to make this thing, or they provide a service that we need over here. So they will also be vetting with the security that they will accept that their vendors will have. But a company, back to your question, the company will ask, they'll start getting these requirements, contractual requirements, or if they need to have something, a cyber insurance, where they get questionnaires, they need to meet some requirements to be able to be covered by cyber insurance. And also, some companies want to get a SOC audit, for example. Like we want to be SOC compliant and SOC certified, because that will help us be more marketable, and we also want, it's required for this, that, or the other. So Praxis can help them get SOC ready. And we also have partnerships for auditors and assessors, assessing firms that we work with to kind of send customers to as well. So I don't know, did that answer your question of how we work, like who we usually work with? But as far as engagement, it's the very first thing that we do when we go in is that we start with an assessment, and it's not just like a technology assessment. That's really where it differs as well. We understand the processes that they have, because as far as assessing a company for whole cybersecurity, there's their technology, but there's also all of their administrative controls and all of their physical controls. So when we come in, we're going to hold a lot of interviews, and one of them will be the IT department. Go, hey, do you have this? Your firewalls? How often do you check them? We'll have a series of questions, but then we'll also be talking to all their HR or like who's doing the background checks. Give me your process for that, because people don't understand that part of the risk there is we outsource everything. Well, do you have it in is your web browser secure? Things like that. So we interview all of the business units, and I'd say business units. A company has to be really big to have business units. Well, sometimes it's one person that does two jobs. That's still the two different jobs, like accounting, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and their HR, or sometimes the same person, or they manage outsourcing those things. But we go in and we find out all of that, and we also find out the flow of the data. Sometimes they're just like a Microsoft shop or a Google shop. They just use these for document repositories and SharePoints. Do you have role-based access? So we find out all of these things. And so that is the very first thing. We have an interview process as part of our assessment to understand the company as a whole, and even talk about where they want to go as far as are they trying to grow, or are they staying static, are they happy where they are? And then we can also start that all gets calculated into their risk and where they are as a baseline of their security.
And I was going to say, one of the things that I see that's very huge for a lot of customers, especially the type of clientele that I work with, because they're more in what I would say the mid-sized companies. So not that they do not think cybersecurity is important, but if they want to work with those larger companies, or they want to be a third party because of everything that has happened in the most recent past, even if we go back to Target, because, how did they get in? They got in by an HVAC, an open endpoint, basically, and we talk about just last week, when I was talking to Tiffany, we talked about, and I can never remember the casino, but they got in through the fish tank. And so it's checking these third parties, making sure that you're not the spot that they end up being like, oh, we can pinpoint it to that company right there.
That's why supply chain and vendor management have grown in importance so much. And I hate to say it, because it's also liability. To be able to prove that you're not liable for that. It's like we had legal agreements. Praxis is, like I said, when I say it's not just technology, we're also doing a lot of that administrative and some of those conversations is, hey, we need to get legal in here to look at these agreements, make sure your contracts are written, and your vendor management programs also explicitly say, this is what you have promised us as somebody who works with us to be held to a certain level of security. We also have them sign and say, you promise that you would be doing that. So you're also part of it. Of the GRC portion is, unfortunately, those very nitty-gritty things. But you as a company, being able to know where you stand and what risk you have. That's where it gets very important. We get out of the compliance and we get into the cybersecurity of a company, that at which level they would like to hold themselves to. That's why that first initial thing is creating a baseline and understanding where we are and where we want to go as a company.
And not to get too into the nitty gritty, but what do you usually see when you go into a company? What would you say are some of the top trends that you guys see when you're like, okay, we stepped in, they asked us to do an assessment. Generally, I see this or I see this. What could someone be looking out for?
So one of the things, which just ties back to the point I also meant to make a little bit earlier, is companies saying, oh, well, we're really small and we don't really have data and everything's in SharePoint and we're fine. We're not too worried about it. We're sure we're not risking anything. And there's a lot of things that I go in and say, okay, well, you don't manufacture a thing where you have schematics and you're not in data privacy other than your employees, data. But every single company is in business for a reason. They all have intellectual property of how they run their company or things like that. So people forget about intellectual property being data that needs to be preserved. And one of the biggest things that I see is saying, where do we store our data? Well, we don't have on-prem, and we're all cloud-based. And then, yeah, we're role-based access. And you go in and you start talking, well, they are role-based access, kind of. And then they've allowed some things, but people, that governance piece, they didn't turn it off. Like somebody needed access to a file, or there's for some reason files have lots of access, even though they previously had set it to very much strict role based. They haven't gone back to recheck things. And so those kinds of things are what really create risk in a company. But that's one thing that we see a lot. And it is in those cloud environments, if they're not only set up correctly, but then governed to have a regular check. And another thing that we see, especially in the small business space, is out of date technology. Things that have reached the end of their life cycle, but they either say, oh, well, we don't have money to do this, and that operating system is just, this computer with this operating system is just going to sit over here on the side of the network, and nobody's going to worry about that. But then it's still on the network. It's not isolated somewhere. The only way to isolate it is to unplug it and just get it completely off. So it's those things, those little things that is just, you sit there and go, what? Or they haven't killed an on-prem solution completely. They still need to go into their archives. So they keep it over here, but it's segmented, but it's not really segmented. Those are some of the things that we see a lot.
It's interesting that you point that out, because I saw lots of comedians make jokes about like the whole CrowdStrike thing. And then when like Delta went down, and why was this company down for so long? And then you look and they're running off like a 6-year-old operating system on the back end.
Yeah, I will tell you, and people aren't really paying attention to that. Right when that was happening, I was fine, and I need to find it because I was in the airport, and it's the little things that people don't notice. I'm at the airport, and I'm not even going to say which airport. I did take a picture of it, which I can send you, and we can post the TV. But the TV at the restaurant, the bar, like that, those airport bars that are kind of standalones by the gate, and the TV itself was giving an error notice. And I looked up the error notice, and the error notice was about they needed to update the system. And I'm like, wow. But anybody could see it. People don't. It's one of those blew my mind kind of moments. And I wanted to blast it, but I didn't want to say, like, I'm at this airport and this is what I see. But it's those little things like the TV, the AV systems and at companies. It's just where because they don't say, oh, we store any data there. Well, no, but it's on the network. And how secure is your network? How secure are your firewalls? Do your firewalls get checked? What's the configs on it? Are they updated? Is anybody looking at them? Like if they're logs, that are just coming off from traffic that's not supposed to be there, is anybody paying attention to those?
Well, I mean, and I compare it to like when I go talk to a customer and I'm like, all right, so let's talk about your cybersecurity. And the first thing I say is, okay, do you have a firewall? And they'll be like, yeah, we have a firewall. I'll be like, when was the last time it was patched and updated? And you get like this blank stare. And I'm like, do you have an MSP or an MSSP that manages? And they're like, we had it installed like 4 or 5 years ago. And, I don't know is generally the answer. And it's like, it works. And I'm like, I don't know if I would call that working. Like, yes, you have it. And yes, you can click that box. But at the end of the day, I can tell you right now, if you go through like a security check for cybersecurity insurance, or you go through a check so that you can work with like one of the big dogs, like the Chevrons or a bigger company, you're not going to pass, because they're going to ask you, when was it updated? When was it patched? And who's maintaining that for you?
Yeah, and I have a love-hate relationship with MSPs for a lot of reasons. I think that they're a great service that has come about and has been able to allow small businesses to get technology help at a good price point, instead of saying, Steve, my brother Steve came and set up the network for me, and so the internet works and we're great. We buy these laptops at Costco. So I think that MSPs have been great for small businesses because of that. They're able to give that service and have much more hardening for the smaller companies. At the same time, where I fight with MSPs is we're like, well, I'm like, you sell security products and you're very well versed on all security. You understand, you can help your customer, but you're also not, unless you're a larger MSP, don't have a dedicated security person. Sometimes they do. I mean, no, don't come at me. Don't come at me. But I know I talk about this a lot. And, that's why I have a lot of, I mean, most of the times that we get brought in is from an MSP going, this is over our heads. And, they know that I will guide them the right way and work with their MSP wholeheartedly to get them where they needed to be. But that's one of the big things. Do you wanted to say something?
No, I wanted to say, because I think that's the piece that a lot of people like sometimes miss. Like, I'm a technology consultant, so it's my job to go in and say, here's what everything looks like, and then bring either an MSP or an MSSP, or bring someone like yourself to the table so that we can complete that tech stack to get everything taken care of and have you be cyber safe and secure and within compliance and regulations. Because a lot of, I mean, what I'm sure you've seen and I've seen over the years is people, especially someone starting out, brand spanking new. And I always tell people, if you start with your like the right foot, and you start like with a baseline or a plan of, okay, we're going to do this to here and we're going to do this. That's way better than getting in the mix and being like 2 years into your business and like, okay, now we're going to get a firewall.
Yeah.
I mean, better late than never. Don't get me wrong.
But I think the other part that people miss, and especially small businesses miss 100%. If they get to a point where somebody says, hey, here's a questionnaire, or do you want to do business with us? The amount of money that they're going to have to shell out to get to where they want to be is way more out of pocket than if they would have just done best practices at the beginning and slowly maintained those things. Mm-hmm. So yes, we have a firewall. Even if I'm going to take MSPs out of micro business. I'm going to tell you, micro business. One of my things is I run my company out of my home. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I do a lot of stuff with NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology. I do a lot of stuff with CIS, and NIST. And if anybody wants to like get this from me later, and this was even like 4 years ago, NIST put out cybersecurity for your home for businesses, and it was going around pretty big during COVID when people went home. But it gives you the best practices of how to maintain your home cybersecurity safe. And this really speaks to the small businesses. So back to, I'm a small business. I run my company through home. I know we've talked about nomad culture, or, I need to have my laptop safe because I work at my house or I work at the coffee shop. Yeah. And it's like, okay, great. Well, if that's the case, and again, talking to a small business, first thing I would do is say, have you hardened your laptop? I know it's just one, but do you have your VPNs? Just those things. I know people that, especially with the HIPAA, right? Mm-hmm. And they go, well, we have the one thing, and then we are mobile to go see patients, and we use this iPad for this. Okay, you have only 2 devices. Are those cybersecurity hardened?
Yeah. Are you using like a mobile device management software, so that, let's just say, worst case scenario, the tablet walks off, whatever happens, it runs amok. Can you mobile erase that tablet? Like, do you have mobile lock it, mobile erase? Oh yeah.
There's so many solutions for small businesses now. Like, it's the price point for some of this technology has come down so much. And again, there are, even if you don't have the money for that technology, we can say, hey, as a policy, as a process of how you interact with that technology, these are your best practices. Let's take that out. So again, taking out that MSP, if I say, cousin Joe set up my Wi-Fi for me, and AT&T, I have my little AT&T router, and have somebody come in and look at it and say, oh, you know what, since I know what I'm doing with this little router, I check it quarterly to make sure my settings have stayed the same. Who knows? One of your kids, who's your teenage kid, came in and couldn't play their Xbox, and so they said there was lag, and so they went in and changed whatever. That's real world, life. Then you go, oh, well, I check it. I run my business out of my home. I go check my router. setting, period.
Well, and I think that's the point, is that with this, with protecting your business and protecting your technology, I mean, it's not ever going to be this like one and done. Like, okay, I did it, we're done. It's, they're going to come out with new compliance things. They're going to come out with new regulations. And let's be very transparent, with the advent of AI, there's going to be new threats that come out on a consistent basis that you need to protect yourself for. So,
it's funny you say that, because that's been one of the things with even my existing clients, where we went from, and I'm gonna talk about compliance that I very deep in the weeds with, GLBA, right? It's the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. Even the smallest of CPAs that are one person or two person CPA need to be compliant to GLBA, which is, I did a deep dive for somewhere I'm going to speak, but because there's the IRS publication that has the security requirements in it overlaps with the GLBA. GLBA is a little bit stronger, but that goes to my point. Even the smallest CPA, and CPAs were not part of, and I might get into my dorky, but I'm going to make it as short as possible. GLBA did not apply to, there was just financial institutions. In 2023, they amended the law and they expanded the definition of a financial institution. That's how CPAs and car dealerships came into the mix, because car dealerships that provide loans for cars, that they do their own loans, they are now a financial institution. CPAs and bookkeepers, financial institution. So that law got expanded in 2023. And every time I talk to a CPA, they're like, well, I'm not going to remember the name of the IRS publication. They're like, well, we're compliant to that. But in the law, it also says, and any other thing that you might be compliant to. So now it is GLBA. So to your point, there was the 6 cybersecurity things that they needed to be compliant to for the IRS. With GLBA having expanded that, they are now have 15, I think I may be getting that wrong, but 15 cybersecurity requirements, one of them being the cybersecurity program. So as you can see, even in the smaller businesses, it's gone from here are the 6 best practices to here are the 15 best practices. Mm-hmm. And every time that we talk about it, it's more and more best practices, because the amount of not only the threats, internal and the external, not just the threats, but also requirements to do business.
Well, and I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because I was literally just talking to a smaller CPA firm today, and I was talking to them about, doing an assessment, and I just kind of started talking to them about base things, about like, double encryption and VPNs when they're not in office. And, then I started talking about getting email security and just things like that in place. And I don't want to say that they look like a deer caught in headlights, but for a moment when we started having this discussion, I could just see their brain being like, we don't have this, we don't have this, we don't have this. And I was like, all right, so here's what we're going to do. And this is how I start every consultation, is like, let's have a full understanding of your network. So I'm like, I will come on site, I will look at what you have, and we'll go from there. And, as part of that, I get like a device count, and I get this, which, like what you're talking about, you go in and you have this assessment with them. Once you at Praxis have an assessment, usually, I guess, how does that work going forward? Is it like, okay, here's the compliance and regulations that y'all need to adhere to, and here's like what does that process look like?
So it's and I'll tell you that at Praxis, one of the things, and I'll start with this, I'm trying not to like go into a tangent, but I want to answer the question. We do the assessment, and then we do what is called a POAM, a plan of action and milestone. That plan of action and milestone, we get all these things. And again, it's not just their technology, it's their administrative and their physical. Let's say they, their compliance requires them to have, like the SOC audits do this as well. Like they have to have key entrance or something logging entrance to the building or to their space, so that it encompasses the physical stuff. But we get all of the information. We first, number one, determine what are the things that we're testing. Is it the SOC audit? If so, which trust criteria? Is it a PCI? Then we go into the PCI things. Are we doing CIS implementation group 1 that is this many controls? Like we just determine that. We run the assessment, we do the assessment, interviews, information, and then what comes out of that is two things. One is a baseline of where we are with risk. So we have something to show the executive team, the board, the business owner, whoever it is that's making these decisions, that need to understand this. And again, owners need to understand that they need to have a stake in it, because at the end of the day, just so you know, just for GLBA, there's legal repercussions if somebody is not, whoever was in charge at the company to own understanding all of this can now get criminally fined if they don't, if there's an incident. So understanding the breach, and then we do the POEM, the plan of action milestone. So we sit with everybody and go, okay, these are the things that need to get remediated. What is your budget? How much risk do we want to, are we okay with? We don't have to fix this. We can do compensating things to remediate this for now. What's our budget? Let's start timelining that. Let's work with IT. And so IT could be like, well, we've been telling them forever that we need security awareness. And so we go, okay, we explain why they need security, how much that would reduce their risk. And then with the IT department, start going, that's the budget for it. This is how much they reduce your risk. Can we start implementing security? Oh, we can't this quarter, but we can start doing it. So that POEM, that plan of action and milestone, is where we start planning the roadmap of security remediation, risk reduction, and cybersecurity maturity for a company.
Well, and I think that's the best way to go forward, is because, kind of what you said, like maybe they can't financially afford at this moment because they didn't plan to put all this in place, but at least you're putting a roadmap in place for here's how we move forward.
Yeah. And at Praxis, we used to be very project based. We were project based. We would do, for 3 months, we'd do this process, and then we would go, okay, well, for the policy, your WISP, your written information security plan and policies, we have this much. And then, but that's why we switched to governance, because that is part of the governance. And just like I said, doing it all this way will actually be less expensive for a small business, in the future, because what we're doing is we're doing the POEM. We're staying on as your team, like your partners in this, working with IT to make sure that's getting done, being there for IT, and then starting to work on all those policies and procedures as part of it throughout the year. So we're, in parallel, working with IT to make sure that those things are moving forward. Implementations of the program, and saying, because after that there's testing. So just like your incident response plan, we get it written. Next year we're also going to test it. We're going to have those tabletops. We're going to have some simulations. We're going to, those are all natural progressions also of how to mature yourself in cybersecurity.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that's, to me, it's like once you go through this roadmap and you put stuff in place, the testing is going to be the best thing, because I'm not going to say how many times, but I would probably say that 85% of the time when I have a client that experiences some type of incident, like a breach, and I can even use this as basic as their internet goes down. It's like they have this plan in place so they can stay up, but then nobody really knows how to implement it. And they're like, which wire are we supposed to move? Or obviously, my recommendation is to get an SD-WAN with a wireless backup, have it fail over automatically. But, let's just say that back in the day, they had it where they moved this and it started magically working. Well, it's the same thing. It's like, if you have this happen, what do you do? And so running that play, so to speak, if you're talking about like a football reference, is being prepared to know what to do.
That's also a perfect example of how we work so well with the technology experts in the room, because we're like, okay, this is a requirement, and this also is a best practice, and work with, how do you suggest we could reduce the risk, since these are your clients and you set this up? And so we will come in and give these the requirements, or what we think what we need to happen. We'll translate the GRC talk, and then have the IT or their technology partners architecting the solution, And as you architect the solution, we'll go, okay, check, 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 check. Yes, that will work. Praxis will not be architecting the solution for you at any time. We are not technology experts.
No, you're like, we're here to tell you this is what needs to happen. Now let's bring in your consultant, let's bring in whomever, and let's have them tell you how to make this happen.
In your mind, absolutely. We can help. Even even in those when I talk about the administrative portions, I'm like, I've talked to departments where they're like, we will not stop taking payments over the phone. Period. Okay, perfect. Then what we have to do is I have to go back to tech, and I have to say, okay, we need a separate network, an isolated network to make it that one device where they're taking on credit card payments and they're writing it down. Make sure that device is on a separate network because that's a requirement for PCI. That might be an extra cost to the customer, but they have said we are not going to stop this process that we insist on doing instead of sending somebody to a link to do a secure payment through PayPal. They're like, no, we want to do it over the phone. Perfect. It's going to cost this much money. Your technology person is going to tell you how much that's going to cost, and they're going to architect the solution. On our end, we're going to write a written policy for the people that you have in this department of how they're supposed to destroy the data, not write it down on a piece of paper. Those things we'll take care of the policy writing in the process. And your technology people are we're gonna tell them what's required for that terminal period and the network. We're not gonna do it, but we're gonna make sure they understand what needs to happen. So that's a good example of how we work together.
Yeah. No, and I think it's funny when you say that because I worked with a furniture store out of El Paso once, and I'm like the person that looks to see if people have, passwords written down on sticky notes and things like that, because obviously that's completely out of compliance in any way, shape, or form. But sure enough, like we were walking around and somebody had like a sticky note with a credit card written down on it because the day that we came in to talk to them and do the consultation was the day that they were calling all like open invoices to get them paid. And they were like, oh, well, this computer was taken up, so we couldn't do it. And so there are like multiple sticky notes with people's information. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like,
oh my goodness. And again, it's one of those, we did go through, explain to them, instead of having it this way over the phone, you could send your customers to a payment portal where you'll reduce liability. Yes, you have to pay for that payment portal, but the PCI kind of shifts to that, and then we'll be responsible about instead of the network, the device, and hardening the device that gets connected to that payment portal. And you're not holding any credit card information in your environment. And they're like, no, because they wanted their customer experience to be a certain way. It was a choice of theirs as a company of how they wanted their client experience to be. We can work with that. We can also offer different ideas of how to do similar, but they didn't want to do it. And that's none of my business. It was none of our business how they wanted to conduct their company and what customer experience they wanted to give. What was our business is how to make sure they did that securely and they were in compliance to PCI, and that their policies were written accordingly and their technology was architected correctly. That was our business.
Well, and I think that really sums it up. I always ask all my guests if there's three things that you could like say to someone, like, call us if you need this, this, and this. We are the perfect solution. What would that be for Praxis?
Just call us anyway. No, I think it is, if you're trying to navigate cybersecurity requirements and it starts sounding like Chinese or overwhelming, because one of those big things for us as well is education to small. We are champions of small business. We're champions of medium-sized business. There are some times where requirements come down and they're like, well, we need to go do a million of these things with technology. And you're like, who's asking you for it? Or is there another solution for it? Can we reduce the cost on it? So when cybersecurity requirements sound like they're too much, call us, because one, we can make sure that you need to comply to those exact ones. And two, or they're like, you need to get certified. And it's like, well, you just really need something equivalent, we can help decipher those things. And two is, if you are in fact needing to be compliant to those things, we can help you figure out how to navigate those with your IT department pretty easily, and with some cost savings in there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. Or if you again, anything like that, those requirements come in the form of a compliance questionnaires, vendor questionnaires to do business. Those become, and then two would just be, if you as a company are worried, like you literally can't know that there are things that you are not cybersecurity safe, and you need to kind of, it's keeping you up at night. It's better nowadays. It's kind of going to the doctor. You may have cancer, and you're like, I don't want to know I have cancer. Well, we need to find out if you have cancer first. Yeah. And if you're a company that really just is worried, or very, as a holistic part of your company, want it to be a cybersecure company from the beginning, and learning how to structure that for the size of your company, not what a corporate or corporation would do. If you really want to structure your company with the cybersecurity plan for growth, because now cybersecurity is part of a company's growth. It also can limit growth. So, and trying to answer an RFP that has requirements, but those people are already compliant, slows down your growth. So,
yeah, I think you touched on it, is that number one, it's great to start out completely ready to go and on the right foot. But if you get down the line, you don't want not having this in place to hinder you from, per se, getting that, piece of like the $400 million deal that this company has, because you're not compliant. So you can't fill out that form.
And imagine if, like, you didn't set up your taxes correctly, your LLC correctly, and you're not, you're just kind of, your finances are going all over the place. It's kind of the same idea. When you sit in the IRS is coming after, you're like, well, I didn't know. Well, I didn't know isn't good enough to the IRS. They don't really care that you didn't know. Very similar. That's what's happening everywhere else with the cyber. And I'll go, well, you're going to have to pay fines and back taxes. Very similar. Those are the things that happen. So that push, that trend for this, just like it does for finances. And so, as you know, most business owners go, I really need to get my taxes in order because I don't have to deal with it later. Very similar to the cyber situation now.
Absolutely, because we all know we don't want to play with the IRS. No, we don't want to play with the IRS. We don't want to play with any compliance regulatory organization. You don't want to be on the naughty list. So first and foremost, thank you so much for joining me today. If somebody wants to schedule an appointment, where can they schedule an appointment?
You can schedule at our website, praxisdatasecurity.com. Or LinkedIn is a great place for me, Maria Scamardo. We'll get that information out. Those are really the best parts. I have, I think on the website we have info at Praxis, and somebody will get back to you there. Especially. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I'm almost done with my drink. It was delicious.
Yeah, I'm getting there. So it was great. Thank you very much. I love that first off, I love what you do. And I think it's great that there's such an additional advocate like yourself to come in and help, because the way I look at it, it's twofold. Number one, you're going to know if, per se, whomever, MSP, whomever, your IT, whoever it may be, is making sure that you stay on the cyber secure route and keeps you within regulations, but it's going to help protect your business. And as we have said multiple times, that is huge in this day and age. So thank you very much for being today. Great drinks. Cheers. And we will catch back up soon. Have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Tech and Tequila. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. To stay updated about all things tech and more, don't forget to visit us at our website, shelbyts.com. If you loved what you heard, remember to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast. Your 5-star ratings and reviews mean the world to us and help us to reach more listeners just like you. So muchas gracias again for joining us with Tech and Tequila. Thank you so much. You learned a lot about tech, and maybe you had a nice drink of tequila.